On your knees! Lick it off, you little gutter rat! She snarled, her voice a venomous whisper that cut through the sound of the pouring rain. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at the single muddy smudge on her blood-red $1,000 Louboutin heel. Before her, 3 identical 5-year-old girls, their cherubic faces stained with tears and grime, trembled. The smallest of the 3, her body shaking uncontrollably, took a hesitant step forward, her tiny hands clenched into fists at her sides. Behind the cruel woman, inside the gleaming glass doors of the boutique, her billionaire boss stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief as he watched the horrifying scene unfold on a security monitor. What this vile manager, Victoria Vance, couldn't possibly know was that her boss was about to intervene. She couldn't know that this single, despicable act of cruelty would detonate an 8-year-old secret, vaporize her career, and reunite a man with the 3 daughters he never knew he had. But before we get into the full, twisted story of how one moment of hate led to a lifetime of love, do me a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. All right, let's get into it. Get away from this entrance, you filthy little beggars! You're scaring off the clientele! Victoria Vance shouted, her sharp voice echoing off the marble facade of Aurelia's, the most exclusive boutique on Rodeo Drive. The 3 small girls huddled deeper into one another, seeking refuge from her wrath under the store's massive black awning. Outside, a rare and violent winter storm lashed Beverly Hills, turning the glamorous street into a blur of headlights and rushing water. The girls were a mirror image of one another. The same wild, dark curls plastered to their foreheads, the same deep, soulful brown eyes, and the same threadbare jackets that offered little protection from the cold. They were only 5 years old. "We're just trying to get out of the rain," said the one who seemed to be the leader, a girl named Ava. Her voice was a soft whisper, but it held a core of defiance. "Our mama's real sick." Victoria crossed her arms over her impeccably tailored Chanel blazer. Her platinum blonde hair was pulled into a severe, tight bun, and her lips were painted the same shade of menacing red as the soles of her shoes. "I don't care if your whole family is on their deathbed," she sneered. "This is Aurelia's. The most powerful people in the world shop here. They don't want to be greeted by the sight of street urchins." Inside Aurelia's, a single handbag cost more than most people made in a month. Gowns that had graced red carpets hung like works of art on illuminated racks. The floors were polished Italian marble, and the air smelled of expensive perfume and leather. Victoria Vance was the gatekeeper of this temple of wealth, and she guarded it fiercely. Her standing order to her staff was simple: keep the undesirables out. "Please," whispered the middle triplet, Mia, her voice trembling. "We're so hungry. Our mommy hasn't been out of bed in days. She can't go to her job." Their mother, Elena Rosario, cleaned houses in the sprawling mansions of Bel Air and Holmby Hills. But for the last week, a severe case of influenza had morphed into a dangerous pneumonia, leaving her too weak to even stand. They lived in a tiny, crumbling apartment in Boyle Heights, a world away from the glitz of Rodeo Drive. Before she'd gotten sick, Elena worked 2, sometimes 3 cleaning jobs a day just to put food on the table for her daughters. "That sounds like a you problem, not a me problem," Victoria said, tapping her foot impatiently. "Go find a shelter." The girls had already tried. The closest one was overflowing, and they had walked for hours in the biting wind and rain, their hope dwindling with every step. Just then, a powerful gust of wind ripped through the street, blowing the smallest girl, Lila, off balance. She stumbled forward, her small, worn-out sneaker landing directly on Victoria's pristine shoe. Victoria let out a theatrical gasp, as if she'd been shot. "These are Christian Louboutins. They cost more than your entire miserable existence." Lila stared down at the tiny speck of mud her shoe had left behind. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her eyes wide with a terror that no 5-year-old should ever know. Victoria's face contorted with rage. She lunged forward and grabbed Lila's thin arm, her long nails digging into the child's skin. The other 2 girls froze, too terrified to even breathe. "You disgusting little creature," Victoria hissed, her face inches from Lila's. "On your knees. Lick it off, you little gutter rat." Tears welled in Lila's eyes. She was cold, hungry, and now utterly terrified. Her little body trembled as she slowly, reluctantly, began to bend her knees and lower her head toward the blood-red shoe. "What in God's name is going on here?" A deep, calm voice sliced through the tension. A tall man with dark hair just beginning to gray at the temples stood in the doorway of Aurelia's. He wore a bespoke gray suit that radiated quiet power. His piercing blue eyes were locked on Victoria's hand, clamped like a vice around Lila's arm. "Mr. Croft!" Victoria instantly released Lila as if she'd been burned. "I was just handling these trespassers. They were harassing customers." Julian Croft, the man who owned not just Aurelia's but a global empire of luxury brands, stepped out into the rain. This store, his very first, was the one that had launched him into the stratosphere of the ultra-rich. By forcing a terrified child to lick your shoe? His voice was dangerously quiet, laced with cold fury. "They're dirty. They don't belong here." Victoria stammered, her composure cracking. "I was just trying to—" "You're done, Victoria," Julian said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Clean out your desk. I want you out of this building in 10 minutes. Victoria's jaw dropped. "But, Mr. Croft, I've been your top manager for 6 years. You can't just—" "I can, and I have," Julian stated flatly. "What you just did was inhuman. We don't treat people that way. We especially don't treat children that way. Get your things. Now." Victoria's face flushed, a blotchy, furious red. She shot a look of pure hatred at the triplets before spinning on her heel and storming back into the store. Julian knelt, bringing himself down to the girl's eye level. "Are you 3 all right?" he asked, his voice now gentle. The girls just nodded, huddling together and clutching each other's hands. "You look frozen, and I'll bet you're hungry. Would you like to come inside where it's warm? I can get you something hot to eat." Ava, the brave one, found her voice. "Yes, please. Thank you, mister." Julian led the 3 identical girls through the pristine store. Employees and wealthy shoppers stopped and stared, their eyes wide with shock and disapproval as the 3 small, soaking wet children in tattered clothes walked past racks of $10,000 dresses. In his lavish private office at the back of the store, Julian gave them thick, soft cashmere throws to wrap themselves in. He had his assistant, Chloe, rush to a nearby cafe and bring back grilled cheese sandwiches, tomato soup, and mugs of hot chocolate topped with mountains of whipped cream. As the girls devoured the food, Julian watched them, a strange sense of unease settling over him. There was something achingly familiar about their faces. The determined set of their jaws, the shape of their eyes. It was like looking at a faded photograph of his own mother, mixed with something else he couldn't quite place, something he saw in the mirror every morning. "What are your names?" he asked softly. Between spoonfuls of soup, they told him. "I'm Ava." "I'm Mia." "I'm Lila." "Those are lovely names," Julian said with a genuine smile. "Where's your mother?" "She's sick," Ava explained. "She has a real bad cough and a fever. She told us to go find help because there was no more food in the house." "What's your mother's name?" "Elena Rosario," Mia said. Julian Croft froze. The piece of sandwich he was lifting to his mouth stopped mid-air. The name echoed in the silent, luxurious office, a ghost from a life he had long since buried. Elena Rosario. He hadn't allowed himself to even think that name in 8 years. Elena Rosario, he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. A flood of images assaulted him. A beautiful, vibrant woman, with warm olive skin and eyes that sparkled with intelligence and laughter. The secret smiles they shared in the hallways of his mansion. The stolen moments in the garden late at night. She had worked for him as a housekeeper 8 years ago. They had fallen into a secret, passionate love affair that felt more real than anything in his carefully curated life. And then, one day, she was just gone. No note, no call, no goodbye. He had spent a fortune trying to find her, but she had vanished without a trace. Julian looked at the 3 girls again, his gaze sharp and intense. They were 5 years old. Elena had disappeared 8 years ago. The math was a brutal, perfect, heart-stopping equation. The girls had Elena's sparkling eyes, but they had his jawline, his mother's smile. These weren't just 3 random, hungry children who had stumbled to his store. These were his daughters. Julian sank slowly into his leather chair, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. After all these years, after all the lonely nights and meaningless successes, he had a family. He had 3 daughters. He had 1,000 questions, but they could wait. Right now, only one thing mattered. He had to make sure they were safe. I knew your mother a long time ago, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm going to help you. Where do you live? The triplets exchanged a look, and then Ava recited their address in Boyle Heights. Julian grabbed his phone, his hands trembling slightly. He called his head of security. I'm on my way to Boyle Heights, and get me Marcus Thorne on the line. Tell him it's an emergency. As he helped the girls into new, warm coats that Chloe had quickly procured from the children's section, Julian's mind was a whirlwind. He had spent the last 8 years building an empire, becoming one of the most powerful men in the country. But the entire time, he had been a father. And he had never known. Everything was about to change. The realization that he was a father, that these 3 small, perfect girls eating sandwiches in his office were his flesh and blood, was a seismic shock. Julian Croft was a man who controlled every aspect of his life. But this was a variable he had never, ever anticipated. He needed help. Excuse me for a moment, girls, Julian said, his voice softer than he'd ever heard it. He walked to the far corner of his office and dialed his assistant. Chloe, I need you back at the store, right now, and bring a change of clothes for the girls, something comfortable. It's an emergency. Is everything all right, Mr. Croft? Chloe's calm, professional voice was a welcome anchor in his swirling thoughts. I'm not sure, he admitted. Just, please hurry. While he waited, Julian sat with the girls, the urge to tell them, to shout, I'm your father. It was overwhelming, but he knew it would only terrify them. First, he had to find Elena. He had to understand. Do you live with anyone else, besides your mom? He asked. Ava shook her head. Just us. But when Mommy's at her jobs, our neighbor Mrs. Alvarez watches us. Mrs. Alvarez is nice, Lila added quietly, clutching a new teddy bear Chloe had found. She gives us sweet bread. 20 minutes later, Chloe arrived, arms laden with shopping bags from the store's children's department. She stopped dead in the doorway, her professional composure momentarily faltering at the sight of 3 identical little girls sitting on her boss's multi-million-dollar Art Deco sofa. Chloe, these are Ava, Mia, and Lila, Julian said. Girls, this is my friend, Chloe. Chloe, ever the professional, recovered instantly. She smiled warmly, and began pulling out soft new tracksuits, sneakers, and sweatshirts, helping the girls change out of their damp, tattered clothes and gently towel drying their tangled hair. "I need to call social services," Julian whispered to Chloe, while the girls were happily comparing the colors of their new shoes. "But I have to investigate something first. I can't risk them getting lost in the system." "What's going on, Julian?" Chloe asked, her voice low. Chloe, I think they might be my daughters." Chloe's eyes widened, but she didn't say a word. She simply nodded. "Whatever you need, I'm here." Julian made the call. An hour later, a tired-looking man from Child Protective Services named Mr. Davis arrived. He had kind eyes but a weary demeanor, a man who had seen too many sad stories. "Mr. Croft, this is a highly irregular situation," he said after Julian had explained what happened, leaving out his personal connection for the moment. "Protocol requires that these children be placed in emergency foster care while we investigate their home situation." "Please," Julian said, his voice firm. "I have reason to believe I know their mother. She used to be an employee of mine. Just give me 48 hours to confirm things before you take them. I can give them a safe, warm place to stay. They've been through more than enough for one day." Mr. Davis sighed, looking from Julian's powerful, determined face to the 3 little girls who had fallen asleep, huddled together on the couch. "That is far from standard procedure, Mr. Croft." "I know, but I'm asking you to trust me. I will provide anything and everything they need." After a long, tense negotiation, Mr. Davis reluctantly agreed. 48 hours, Mr. Croft. Then I have to follow the book, no exceptions." As soon as Mr. Davis left, Julian called Marcus Thorne, the best private investigator in Los Angeles. "Marcus, I have a job for you. It's the most important one I'll ever give you. Her name is Elena Rosario. She has 5-year-old triplet daughters. I need you to find her, now." Meanwhile, Victoria Vance was storming out of Aurelia's, a cardboard box of her personal belongings in her arms, mascara streaking down her enraged face. Her perfect, curated life had just imploded. She yanked her phone from her purse and dialed a number. "Blake, it's Victoria. Meet me at the Café Roma in 20 minutes. I've got a story for you about the sainted Julian Croft that you are going to absolutely love." Blake Harrison, a reporter for a notorious online gossip site known for destroying reputations, arrived at the cafe, practically salivating. "He humiliated me," Victoria seethed, stabbing at her cappuccino foam. "Fired me on the spot, in front of everyone, over some filthy street kids." "Croft never gives interviews. He's famously private," Blake said, his pen poised over his notepad. "What's the angle?" "I know things about him," Victoria lied, her mind racing. "About his past, the way he treats the women who work for him. And now this sudden bizarre interest in 3 homeless girls? Doesn't that strike you as a little creepy?" Blake's lips curved into a cruel smile. "Very. Tell me everything." Across town, Marcus Thorne was already in Boyle Heights at the address the girls had provided. The apartment building was dilapidated, the paint peeling in long strips. Marcus showed Elena's photo, an old employee ID picture Julian had provided to a few residents. On the 3rd floor, an older woman with kind eyes recognized her instantly. "Elena? Of course, she lives right next door, but I haven't seen her come out for days. Her little girls disappeared this morning. My husband and I have been worried sick." "I'm working for someone who is helping the girls," Marcus explained gently. "They're safe. Could you show me her apartment?" The woman, Sofia Alvarez, led Marcus to the apartment at the end of the hall. She had a spare key for emergencies. The moment they stepped inside, Marcus knew the situation was dire. Elena was lying on a thin mattress on the floor, barely conscious. Her breathing was shallow and ragged, and a wave of heat radiated from her forehead. She needs a hospital right now, Marcus said, dialing Julian immediately. Sir, I've found her. It's bad. Within 30 minutes, Julian's car screeched to a halt in front of the building. The sight of Elena, so thin, pale, and struggling for every breath, was a physical blow. Elena, he whispered, kneeling beside the mattress. Her eyelids fluttered open. At first, her gaze was unfocused, but then a flicker of recognition. Julian. Her voice was a dry, rasping whisper. How? Don't talk. We're getting you help. As they waited for the ambulance he'd called, Sofia Alvarez explained Elena's desperate situation. She worked so hard, Sofia said, her voice thick with emotion. 2, 3 jobs, always for those girls. When she got this sickness, she couldn't work. No work meant no money for rent, no money for food. It happened so fast. Thank you for looking out for them, Julian said, his voice choked. Those girls are angels, Sofia replied. So smart, so polite. Elena has raised them right, despite having nothing. The paramedics arrived and carefully moved Elena onto a stretcher. As they carried her out, she reached a trembling hand toward Julian. The girls, she whispered, her eyes pleading. My babies. They're safe, Julian assured her, taking her hand. They found me, Elena. They came to my store. Tears streamed from the corners of Elena's eyes. I never wanted... Not like this, she whispered, before losing consciousness again. Julian rode with her to Cedars-Sinai, holding her hand the entire way, his mind a chaotic storm of guilt, anger, and a terrifying, protective love. Why had she run? Why had she kept this from him? Marcus stayed behind to search the apartment for any information. He found a small box under the mattress. Inside were the girls' birth certificates, 3 identical certificates, listing Elena Rosario as the mother and father unknown. They were dated exactly 5 years and 3 months ago, 9 months after the last night he and Elena had spent together. Back at Julian's sprawling penthouse overlooking the city, Chloe was helping the triplets settle in. The girls stood pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, their faces filled with awe at the sea of glittering lights below. Is this where you live? Mia asked, her small hand touching the cool glass. Yes, Chloe replied gently. Mr. Croft lives here. It's bigger than our whole building, Ava said. Where's our mommy? Lila asked, her voice small and sad. I want my mommy. Chloe knelt beside her. Your mom is very sick, sweetie, Mr. Croft is with her right now, making sure the best doctors help her get all better. When Julian finally returned to the penthouse late that night, the girls were asleep in one of his guest rooms, curled together in the middle of a bed larger than their entire living room. Chloe met him at the door. How is she? Pneumonia, severe dehydration and malnutrition. They have her in the ICU. Julian rubbed his exhausted face. She's been sick for weeks, Chloe, working until she literally collapsed, trying to feed them. And the girls, are they? Julian nodded, his expression grim. Marcus found their birth certificates. The timeline is perfect. They're mine, Chloe. I have 3 daughters, and for 5 years I had no idea. What are you going to do now? Chloe asked. Before he could answer, a small voice came from down the hall. Lila stood there in a new set of pink pajamas, clutching a pillow. Is our mommy going to die? She asked, her bottom lip trembling. Julian crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt in front of her. No, sweetheart. Your mommy is very sick, but she has the best doctors in the world helping her. She just needs to rest in the hospital for a little while. Can we see her? As soon as she's feeling a little better, I promise. Lila looked at him with those eyes, so much like Elena's. You knew our mommy a long time ago? Julian took a deep, shaky breath. Yes, a very long time ago. Before you were born. Were you her friend? Lila asked, with the simple innocence of a child. A sad smile touched Julian's lips. Yes, he said. We were very good friends. He gently guided Lila back to bed, tucking her in between her sleeping sisters. As he watched the three of them, a fierce, primal wave of protectiveness washed over him. These were his children. He had missed 5 years of their lives. He would not miss a single day more. Back in the living room, he looked at Chloe, his decision made. I'm going to take care of them, Chloe, all of them. I still need to understand why Elena kept them from me, but that doesn't matter right now. They're my responsibility. They're my family. It's not going to be easy, Chloe warned. Your entire life is about to change. It already has, Julian said quietly, his gaze fixed on the doorway to the room where his daughters slept. What do you think? Was Elena right to keep the secret, or should she have told Julian from the start? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video if you're rooting for them to win. Julian barely slept that night. The silence of his massive penthouse feeling different now, filled with the soft breathing of his 3 daughters. Every hour, he found himself walking to their room, just watching them sleep, a feeling of profound awe and terror warring within him. By sunrise, he had a plan. I have to be at the hospital, Julian told Chloe when she arrived early the next morning. Can you stay with the girls? Of course, Chloe said. What should I tell them about their mother? The truth, Julian said, grabbing his coat, that she's sick, but she's getting the best care in the world. And I've called a lab. They're sending a technician here this morning to get a DNA sample. At Cedars-Sinai, Julian found Elena in the intensive care unit, surrounded by a web of tubes and monitors. Her condition was critical, but the doctors said she was responding to the powerful antibiotics. I want the best pulmonary specialist in the country on a plane here by tonight, Julian told the hospital administrator. Whatever it costs. He sat by Elena's bedside for hours, holding her limp hand. Seeing her like this, so diminished from the vibrant woman he remembered, filled him with a confusing mix of emotions. Profound sadness for her suffering, white-hot anger at the circumstances that led her here, and a deep, aching regret for the years they had lost. Why, Elena? He whispered to her unconscious form. Why didn't you just tell me? We could have handled this together. Late that afternoon, a courier arrived at the hospital with a sealed envelope. Julian's hands shook as he tore it open. The DNA test results were unequivocal. Probability of paternity, 99.999%. He was the father of Ava, Mia, and Lila Rosario. The words on the paper seemed to rearrange the entire world. He immediately called his top corporate lawyer, Amelia Hayes. Amelia, I need you at the hospital. I have a personal matter. It's complicated. This is quite a situation, Julian, Amelia said an hour later, after he had explained everything. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had navigated him through billion-dollar mergers, but this was new territory for her, too. First things first, we need to legally establish paternity. Then we have to address custody. I want them, Julian said, his voice raw with conviction. I want to take care of all of them, Elena and the girls. Elena might not agree, Amelia pointed out gently. She hid them from you for 5 years, Julian. There's a reason. I have to find out that reason, Julian said, handing her the DNA report. But it doesn't change anything. Those girls are my daughters. I've already lost 5 years. I'm not losing a single second more. Across town, Victoria Vance was holding court in Blake Harrison's cramped office at the gossip site. She was on her second martini and feeling emboldened. Julian Croft likes to project this image of a self-made man of the people, she said, savoring her role as a confidential informant. But did you know the mother of these children, this Elena Rosario, was his maid? He has a pattern. He preys on his female employees. Blake typed furiously, a hungry glint in his eyes. A Billionaire and His Maid. It's a classic. Readers will devour this. That evening, the first article hit the internet, and the title was like a punch to the gut. Billionaire Julian Croft's bizarre obsession with street children. What is he really hiding? It was filled with innuendo and suspicion, painting Julian not as a savior, but as a predator. The story spread like wildfire. By the time Julian returned to his penthouse, the girls were having a dance party in the living room with Chloe. For a moment, watching them laugh, he forgot about the storm brewing outside his walls. The doorbell rang, and Chloe opened it to find Sofia Alvarez, the kind neighbor holding a worn backpack. "Mrs. Alvarez." The girls swarmed her, hugging her legs. "My darlings," Sofia said, her eyes tearing up. "I was so worried. I brought some of your things." She pulled out 3 well-loved, slightly ragged stuffed animals. "Bunny!" Lila cried, grabbing a faded brown rabbit and hugging it tight. Julian invited Sofia to stay for dinner. As the girls played, Sofia told him more about Elena's life. "She never asked for a thing," Sofia explained. "So proud, so scared of losing those girls if the authorities found out how poor they were. She'd rather starve than ask for a handout." "Did she ever mention me?" Julian asked quietly. Sofia shook her head. "Only that their father wasn't around. She never said a bad word about him, just that things were complicated." The next day, as Julian sat by Elena's bedside, reading to her from a worn copy of 100 Years of Solitude he'd found in her apartment, her eyes fluttered open. She looked around the sterile room, confused, and then her eyes landed on him. A wave of panic washed over her face. "My girls!" she gasped, her voice hoarse. "Where are my babies?" "They're safe," Julian said quickly, taking her hand. "They're okay, Elena. They're at my home, with Chloe." Tears filled Elena's eyes. "Julian," she whispered. "How?" "They found me," he said softly. "They came to the store looking for help." He watched a mixture of relief and dread play across her face. "Elena? They're my daughters. I did a DNA test." She closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a path down her temple. "I'm so sorry, Julian. I never wanted you to find out this way." "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, the question that had been tormenting him for days. "Why did you just disappear?" Elena turned her face away. "You were Julian Croft. Your empire was just beginning. You had a life plan, and a pregnant housekeeper from East LA wasn't part of it." "You didn't give me a choice," Julian said, his voice laced with years of hurt. "You made the decision for both of us." "I was trying to protect you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Your reputation, and I was protecting them from being rejected, protecting myself from having my heart broken." "I looked for you, Elena," Julian confessed, his voice dropping. "For almost a year, I hired people. You were just gone." Elena's eyes widened in genuine surprise. You looked for me?" "Of course I did," he said. "What we had, it wasn't just a fling to me." Just then, his phone buzzed violently. It was Chloe. "You need to see this." She had sent him a link to Blake Harrison's newest article. The headline was even worse than the first. "Gold Digger Mom. Did Elena Rosario trap a billionaire with triplets?" As Julian's stomach dropped, the door to the hospital room opened. Mr. Davis from CPS walked in, along with a stern-looking woman holding a clipboard. "Mr. Croft, Ms. Rosario," the woman said, her voice devoid of warmth. "My name is Ms. Davis, and due to the high-profile nature of this case and the serious allegations being made in the press, I am here to inform you that I am recommending the immediate placement of the children into temporary state foster care pending a full investigation." "No." Julian stood up so fast his chair screeched against the floor. That is absolutely not happening. Elena, her face as white as the hospital sheets, tried to push herself up, reaching instinctively for children who weren't there. "You can't," she pleaded, her voice a raw whisper. "You can't take my babies." Ms. Davis adjusted her glasses, unfazed. "This is standard procedure, Ms. Rosario. There are serious concerns about your ability to provide for the children, and given the media frenzy, we need to ensure their environment is stable. What could be more stable than being with their father?" Julian demanded, his voice shaking with a rage he was struggling to control. "A father you've only known you were for 2 days, Mr. Croft," Ms. Davis countered coolly. "A formal hearing has been scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Until then, the children will remain with you, but I will have a supervisor posted at your residence. Be prepared, Mr. Croft. The court will not be impressed by your wealth. It will only be impressed by the best interests of these children." The door clicked shut, leaving Julian and Elena in a stunned, horrified silence. They had just found each other again, only to face the very real threat of being torn apart forever. Against the strenuous objections of her doctors, Elena signed herself out of the hospital the next morning. Julian helped her into a wheelchair, her body still frail, but her eyes burning with a fierce maternal resolve. "I raised them alone for 5 years," she said, her voice weak but steady. "I'm not going to let a stranger take them from me now." When they arrived at the courthouse, it was a media circus. A swarm of reporters and photographers descended on their car, shouting questions and shoving cameras in their faces. Julian's security team formed a protective circle around them, ushering them through the chaos. Inside, their lawyer, Amelia Hayes, met them in a private room. The triplets were there with Chloe, playing quietly in a corner, oblivious to the storm raging around them. Sofia Alvarez sat with them, offering a reassuring presence. "The judge is a man named Thomas Wilson," Amelia explained quickly. "He's old school, fair, but he doesn't suffer fools, and he's seen it all. Our strategy is simple. Honesty. Julian, we present the DNA proof of paternity. Elena, you tell the story of why you left. We need him to see you not as a gold digger, but as a protective mother who made a difficult choice." As they prepared, Blake Harrison's website published another venomous article. "Billionaire tries to buy his way into custody." The narrative he was weaving was clear and damaging. Just then, Chloe's phone buzzed. It was a call from an unknown number. A quiet voice on the other end said, "My name is Jaime. I work at Aurelia's. I have information that might help Mr. Croft. Victoria Vance knew who Elena was. She recognized her weeks ago and had her thrown out of the store." Amelia's eyes lit up. "Get the security footage, now!" Within an hour, Julian's tech team had isolated the footage. There it was, clear as day. Elena, looking thin and desperate, approaching the store 2 weeks before the incident with the girls. Victoria recognizes her, a cruel smirk on her face, before waving over security to have her removed. "She knew," Julian said, his voice a low growl. "This whole thing with the girls, it was personal. It was malicious. This is our silver bullet," Amelia said, saving the file to her tablet. "It proves the source of all this negative press is a vengeful liar." The courtroom was tense and quiet. Judge Wilson, a formidable man with sharp, intelligent eyes, listened patiently as the lawyer for CPS laid out her concerns. "Your Honor, we have a situation where the mother has been raising the children in poverty, and the father has been absent for their entire lives. There are serious questions about stability." Amelia responded calmly, presenting the DNA evidence and calling her first witness, Sofia Alvarez. Sofia's testimony was powerful and heartfelt. "I have seen Elena go without dinner so her girls could eat," she said, her voice ringing with sincerity. "I have seen her walk 2 miles in the rain to take them to the library because she couldn't afford the bus. Those girls are loved. That is stability." Julian testified next, explaining how he discovered his daughters and his unwavering commitment to them. When it was Elena's turn, she refused the wheelchair, using the railing to support herself as she stood before the judge. "Your Honor," she began, her voice shaking but clear. "I was wrong. I was young and I was scared. I thought a man like Julian Croft wouldn't want a child with his housekeeper. I thought I was protecting everyone." She took a ragged breath. "But I have spent every single day of the last 5 years trying to give my girls a good life. We didn't have money, but we had love. Please, please don't punish my children for my mistake. Don't tear our family apart just as we're starting to find each other." After hearing all the testimony, Judge Wilson addressed the court. "This is a complex and unusual case. I am concerned about the sudden and dramatic changes in these children's lives." He looked directly at Julian and Elena. "However, I am also deeply moved by the evident bond between this mother and her children, and the clear commitment of the father. Therefore," he announced, his voice booming in the silent room, "I am delaying a final decision for 1 week. During that time, the children will remain in the joint care of Mr. Croft and Ms. Rosario, under the full-time supervision of a court-appointed monitor. We will reconvene here next Friday to make a permanent determination." Elena nearly collapsed with relief. Julian rushed to her side, helping her back into her wheelchair. They had won a reprieve. They had 1 week to prove they could be the family their daughters deserved. As they left the courthouse, pushing through the throng of reporters, Julian noticed Victoria Vance standing across the street, watching them with a smug, hateful expression. This wasn't just about custody anymore, he realized. It was about justice. But as he looked down at Elena and at his 3 daughters holding her hands, he knew what his priority was. "One battle at a time," he whispered. "Our daughters come first." "Always," Elena agreed, her hand finding his. Their new life began under the watchful eye of Rachel Green, the court-appointed supervisor. She was a stern, professional woman who set up a monitoring station in the guest room and informed them that all their interactions would be observed and recorded. The constant surveillance was unnerving, but they had no choice. The first few days were a clumsy dance of 2 strangers trying to become parents together. Julian, a man used to commanding boardrooms, was now learning how to braid hair and adjudicate disputes over toys. Elena, still weak from her illness, directed him from the couch, teaching him the girls' favorite songs, their nightly routines, and the specific way they liked their sandwiches cut. Meanwhile, Julian's investigative team had delivered a bombshell. Not only had Victoria Vance been embezzling from Aurelia's for years, but in her panic after being fired, she had tried to remotely access the company's servers to delete the evidence. Julian arranged a meeting. Victoria arrived at his corporate office looking pale and nervous. In front of the silent observer, Rachel Green, Julian laid it all out. The evidence of her theft, the proof of her perjury, and the security footage of her malicious acts. "You have 2 choices, Victoria," he said calmly. "You can face felony charges for embezzlement and perjury, or you can go back into that courtroom next week and tell the truth. About everything." Cornered and defeated, Victoria agreed. The week was filled with small, tentative breakthroughs. The girls began to relax, their laughter echoing through the once silent penthouse. One evening, as Julian was tucking them in, Ava looked at him with her serious, soulful eyes. "Are you really our daddy?" she asked. Julian's heart constricted. He knelt by her bed. "Yes," he said softly. "I am. And finding you 3 is the best thing that has ever happened to me." The night before their final court date, Julian and Elena sat on the balcony, the city lights spread below them like a carpet of fallen stars. They finally had the conversation they should have had 8 years ago. They talked about their fears, their regrets, and the deep, unspoken feelings that had never truly gone away. For the first time, they weren't the billionaire and the maid. They were just Julian and Elena, two people finding their way back to each other. The final court hearing was a different affair. Their side was bolstered by new, powerful testimony. Sofia Alvarez took the stand again, this time revealing an incredible coincidence. Years ago, before moving to Boyle Heights, she had worked as a housekeeper for Julian's mother, Catherine Croft. She presented old, time-stamped photos she had taken of a happy, laughing Julian and Elena together in the garden of the Croft estate, proving their genuine, affectionate relationship long before the pregnancy. Then, Jessica called her final witness, Karen Mitchell. Pale and trembling, Karen confessed to everything. Her embezzlement, her deliberate cruelty towards the girls, and her calculated campaign to destroy Julian's reputation by feeding lies to Blake Harrison. The reporter, who was in the courtroom, fled in humiliation. Finally, Ms. Davis from CPS took the stand. "Your Honor," she said, "after a week of intensive observation, I am officially reversing my initial recommendation. The children are thriving. They are safe, happy, and deeply bonded to both of their parents. It is my professional opinion that it is in their absolute best interest to remain in the joint custody of Ms. Rosario and Mr. Croft." After a short recess, Judge Wilson delivered his verdict. In my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen a case evolve so dramatically. What began as a situation rife with concern has become a powerful example of commitment and love. He smiled down at the family. "I am therefore granting full and permanent joint legal and physical custody to Maxwell Stone and Diana Johnson. This case is closed." The courtroom erupted in quiet sobs of relief. The triplets, sensing the victory, rushed into their parents' arms. As they left the courthouse, Maxwell stopped to face the press. "My family has been through an ordeal," he said, his arm wrapped protectively around Diana. "All I will say is that I am the luckiest man in the world to have found my daughters and their mother. Now, we ask for the privacy to become the family we were always meant to be." 6 months later, Diana, now healthy and vibrant, cut the ribbon on the new Rosario Croft Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing housing, legal aid, and educational grants for single mothers in crisis. The foundation was housed in the newly renovated ground floor of the Aurelia's building. Diana, who had completed her college degree online, was its executive director. Julian had fundamentally changed his business practices, implementing industry-leading wages and benefits, and tying executive bonuses to community impact. He sold his cold, massive penthouse and bought a warm, sprawling house in a family-friendly neighborhood with a big backyard. One sunny afternoon, Julian watched from the kitchen window as Diana pushed their 3 laughing daughters on a swing set. He had lost an empire of solitude and gained a world of messy, beautiful, chaotic love. He finally understood that true wealth wasn't measured by stock prices or acquisitions, but by the sound of your children's laughter and the feeling of the right person's hand in yours. He was finally, truly rich. What an incredible story. Their journey from a rainy street corner to a loving home shows that the greatest treasures aren't bought, they're built. If you were moved by their journey, please hit that like button, subscribe for more content like this, and check out the video that's on your screen right now. You won't regret it.